Okay, welcome back to Shooting It Straight with me, Antonius. In this video featuring the Milsurp SKS. We're going to go over several topics, one of which is 3 basic ways to load your SKS. And I'll try to demonstrate those 3 right here fairly quickly, and then I'll speak a little more in detail on each one of them. Now, of course, most of us want to use a stripper clip. And that's I love that. Just push it in and you're good to go. And of course you'll pull back your bolt to charge it. Now I'm not going to do this here because there's no sense in chambering it. I'm not going to fire. So I'm going to release those right here. All right. And then we'll go into top loading, and I'm just going to do a few to demonstrate. You can just put them in individually on the low side of the start on the low side of the doggone yeah. And just load it just like you would any other staggered magazine. And you know, I'm just going to do a few, but you can do it all the way to 10, and then of course charge it. Right now we'll go to another way, and this is a little different. We're going to let the bolt go forward, and we're going to close it. Well, actually I'm going to open it back up, but here we're going to turn it upside down. We're going to turn it upside down. We're going to pop the magazine up, and you can drop them in from the bottom. You can bottom feed, but the follower here, and that's the word I got hung up on. The follower here, pay attention. This offset. So make sure your round goes in the side of the magazine where the offset, where the lowest part is first. Then that, there, and so forth. And you have to be careful in there, because if you do it wrong, you could wind up with a sort of a malfunction, and I'll get more into that. And of course you'd want to charge it. Okay, so that's the 3 basic ways, at least that I know of, to load your SKS. Okay, let's have a very brief discussion about each of the 3 loading methods that I just demonstrated, and then we'll move on and examine the popular claim that the SKS in particular has a tendency for slam firing, and we'll look at why this can happen and how easily this can be eliminated. And finally, because the Milsurp SKS will normally come to us packed in Cosmoline, we'll look at ways to remove this and why it's critical to remove this. All right, now let's discuss those 3 loading options that I just demonstrated. Now, the first option we looked at was the stripper clip method. Right? Now, it can be very quick and convenient, but it will require that you use only the best brand of clips, which are usually going to be the Milsurp clips, and you know, not the cheap new production knockoff clips or the clones. Now let's spend just a minute on stripper clips, because this is important. The better clips are going to be the Czech Milsurp clips, the usually marked as BNX or BXN, and there's a picture of it for you. That was made for the VZ58 rifle, and sometimes the year of manufacture will be stamped along those letters too. In my opinion, those are the best stripper clips for most SKSs. Chinese Milsurp strips might have the a stamped letter number of 31 on it. Okay, if you see a 31 stamped on it, that's a Chinese Milsurp clip. And sometimes it'll have 321 stamped on it as well. A Soviet Milsurp clip might have a diamond with 3 Cyrillic letters, or perhaps it'll say ZTK. And there's pictures of it because I don't have a Soviet Milsurp clip. But as you can see, most of the known decent clips seem to be the genuine Milsurp clips. A notable exception here now is the commercially made Chinese 1980s Norinco type clips that simply have the word China stamped on it. Other than these, I stay away from anything else, especially commercially made ones like NC Star, or those that advertise new production or brand new. I usually stay away from those. And now, you'll see some with a 31 stamped on it, but in a circle. All right, these are actually clones or reproductions. These tend to be kind of a hit or miss in my experience. My advice on it, look, just get genuine Milsurp clips off of eBay and stay away from Amazon when looking for stripper clips. Now, the second loading option was a top loading method of loading each cartridge into the magazine individually. You know, the same way you would load a detached AK-47 or AR-15 magazine. So, you know, that's pretty straightforward. The last option was the Krag method. Now, that's a bottom loading method. That loading method is somewhat similar to the loading method used with the old Krag Jorgensen rifles. Now, it can be done with the SKS, but sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, if the cartridges are not staggered in proper relationship with the offset of the followers, or the follower, you might wind up with some malfunction, usually by having a live round be completely ejected or stovepiped. And you can even watch this happen with the great Jerry Micklick in one of his older videos. Just personally, I prefer using the stripper clips. It seems to be the easiest and quickest method for me, but that's just me. You do it how you want to. If you don't have any quality stripper clips, get some. They're really not that expensive. All right, let's look at this slam fire misconception. And I call it a misconception because it's really not perceived the right way. For decades now, the SKS has been the victim of a false allegation by many people that it is flawed and unsafe because it has a tendency to slam fire, or fire when the bolt goes into full battery. And they usually blame the free-floating firing pin system for this. All right? Except that is not accurate. Now, it's true an SKS can slam fire or discharge unintentionally when the bolt slams forward into battery. But it's not due to the fact that they have a free-floating firing pin. Many other rifles have free-floating firing pins just like it, such as the AR-15, the M1 Garand, the military M4 and M16 pattern rifles, and most AK-47s. Yet, slam fire incidents are rare with them. Now, why is that? Well, it's because the Milsurp SKSs have been packed in a crate of Cosmoline and stored in a neutral country for 20 plus years, waiting to satisfy our import requirements. That's why. The other rifles I just mentioned are not. So it isn't a poorly designed firing pin or any sort of a mechanical imperfection that causes most SKS slam fires. What it is crud or Cosmoline or both in the bolt and in the firing pin channel that causes that. Now this can cause the firing pin to become stuck in the fully forward position, which will result in slam fires when the bolt goes into battery, right? Now, I've seen that many times. Slam fire concerns can be totally solved by simply cleaning out any and all debris, fouling, crud, or Cosmo from the entire bolt assembly. And I mean everything, especially the firing pin channel. It does not require a different or special firing pin, but if you're still a little bit nervous about the possibility of slam fires, even though you thoroughly disassembled and cleaned that bolt and put it back together, you can easily replace that OEM firing pin with a Murray's firing pin, which uses a spring as an added measure. All right, that way the firing pin has spring tension and is no longer free floating. Okay, now let's talk about some Cosmoline. And I'm not going to go into any great detail, but the biggest mistake people make when obtaining a Milsurp SKS that has been packed in Cosmoline is failing to properly remove all of that Cosmoline. You need to get all of it out, and from every part of that SKS, wooden stock included, and especially from the entire bolt assembly, the firing pin and the firing pin channel, as I mentioned earlier. Those parts need to be spit shine clean. To accomplish this, you must completely disassemble the rifle, completely disassemble the bolt in its entirety by knocking out the retaining pin, then removing the firing pin and the extractor and the spring with it. Now, this is not going to be a comprehensive video focusing on this particular procedure. It's just a quick overview, okay? Now, there are a variety of ways to rid Cosmoline from these and other small parts and springs. I prefer to first just wipe off the excess Cosmoline, get the majority of it off as best I can, then soak all the small parts in a large Tupperware bowl or a turkey pan filled with mineral spirits, not mineral oil, mineral spirits. Soak it overnight, or at least for several hours, and then detail clean the parts by hand, and I usually do that with Hoppy's bore solvent and a toothbrush. The trigger group, but you don't need to disassemble this, but the trigger group, the recoil spring, the gas tube, if you can remove the wood handguard here, the piston extension and its spring, which is located inside of the rear sight housing. It's in here. And the magazine should all be in that soaking pan. Now, a different option to the overnight soaking is to first spray down the parts with mineral spirits from a spray bottle, and wipe off the bulk of the Cosmoline, and then put those parts in that same pot or pan or vat or whatever and fill it with hot water. It doesn't need to be boiling water, it only needs to be hot water. Cosmoline is a petroleum-based wax-like corrosive inhibitor. It is not a lubricant, and it's generally used for long-term storage. Its melting point begins at 130 degrees Fahrenheit, but water heated to around 180 degrees or so will work a little bit better and quicker. Now, for some reason you decide to actually boil these parts, and I've never really seen the need to do that, but some people do. I would probably leave the springs out and just soak the springs in the mineral spirits. The reason is excessive heat not only causes thermal expansion and contraction in small springs, but it can also lead to other dimensional and property changes by altering the spring's structural integrity at the atomic level. Now, I'm not saying that will happen, mainly because the temperatures would really need to be a lot higher to do that. But I'm only acknowledging the fact that it is possible depending on the spring material, the spring type, and the heat levels you use. It's just a small risk that I personally see no need in taking. You know, that's all that is. Now, for the receiver and barrel assembly, which you'll need to separate from the stock, of course, get a spray bottle and fill it with those mineral spirits. Spray the parts heavily and brush it with a toothbrush or some other type of a soft brush. Then wipe clean and repeat that as necessary. Get all the nooks, crannies, channels, corners, and hollow areas like the gas tube and the piston extension channel in the rear sight housing with cleaning patches and Q-tips, and don't forget the bore. And finally, on that note, sometimes using these methods to eliminate the Cosmoline, depending on what methods you use, but it can leave the steel parts extremely dry and without any protection against corrosion. So what I do is lightly oil all of those parts with just simple gun oil or my silicone gun cloth, just prior to reassembly to protect them from any corrosion. Because you've got all that corrosion protection off of there, you need to put it back on. All right, so how about the stock? Well, yeah, you'll need to get the Cosmoline off of and out of the wooden stock as well. Because after a while, that wood will absorb some of that Cosmoline, and simply wiping it off won't work. The Cosmoline will just continue to weep out of it, especially in warmer environments. This will prevent you from being able to refinish or refurbish the stock in any way if that's what you plan on doing. Now again, I'm not going to go through a detailed step-by-step demonstration in this video, but there are several options here. Me personally, I usually start out by spraying the stock with that spray bottle inside and out with the mineral spirits and just let it soak for a few minutes before I wipe it all down, just to get all the crud off of it and things of that nature. Then I'll set that stock outside on the patio in the sun on a warm day. Some people like to put it in a trash bag and do that, and that's okay too, but I never did it, and it turned out just fine. Because the best way to draw out the Cosmoline from the wood is by heat. The Cosmoline will begin to weep out. You'll see that. Now, I'll step out there, or here actually. I'll step out here and wipe off the Cosmoline sweat from the stock about probably every hour or so. Sometimes it takes me all day to do that, sometimes a day and a half, but it's worth it. Once it's sufficiently dried out and no more Cosmo is weeping out of it, you can then begin to refinish or refurbish it, if, again, that's what you plan on doing, by stripping off the old finish and steaming out any of the small dents or dings before finally treating the wood. Remember, you've got to treat it after you draw all that out. You've got to treat it and then seal the wood before you add your final finish and protect it on there. So when you're ready to reassemble the carbine or carbine, let me add an important note here. Make certain that the recoil spring is installed correctly. There is a wrong way. There's a picture. It shows you the right way and the wrong way. You want the curly or wavy end in the bolt carrier and the straighter end of it sticking out. Remember, the pigtail goes into the igloo. All right, that's about all I have on this topic for now. I hope you found some useful information here. I do have another SKS video coming up. It should be interesting, so look for that. Thanks for watching this one, and I'll see you right here again next week at Shooting It Straight. Until then, ciao, fellas.